Hey, how's it going guys? My name is Dom and welcome to today's video where we're going to be exploring the idea of extending built-in data types with JavaScript, alright? So I'm talking about doing something such as extending the built-in array to give it more functionality, okay? Now when it comes to the recommendation of whether or not you should do this in your own projects, that's a little bit up in the air. So you're going to find opinions online which say you probably shouldn't do this, but honestly, for smaller projects that you're only going to use yourself, I don't see why not. All right, so this right here is an HTML list. So we're going to be extending the built-in array in today's video to add more functionality and make it so when you push a new item to this array, it's going to update the HTML list automatically. Okay, so going inside the text editor right here, we can see we have the list with an ID of my list. So let's drop down in the JavaScript and of course begin by creating a new type of array. So down here, we're going to say class observable array. So observable, just like that, array extends the built-in array just like that. So with this line of code here, we're taking the functionality from the built-in normal JavaScript array and creating something different, and we're going to be calling it observable array. So this class here, if we create a new observable array, it's going to work in the exact same way as a standard array without doing anything to it. So for example, let's drop down here and we're going to say const names equal to a new instance of observable array. And then we're going to pass in here a couple of items. So we'll say something like Dom, we can say Greg, and we'll just say Abby. Okay, so those three names. Now, it might be a good time to simply remove everything from this list up here. That way, we're going to start from scratch. So now, if I go back in the browser and I simply see what names looks like, we can see it's simply our observable array, but it has all the same methods as a standard array. So we're simply inheriting that functionality. We've still got our three items in that array. So let's go back inside here. We can now start doing things differently. So in the constructor, so we can say constructor right here. In the constructor for our observable array, we're going to be taking in two parameters here. Okay, we're going to say on push, and also using the rest parameter syntax here, we can just say dot dot dot, and then we can just say elements. Okay, so this right here, this on push, eventually we're going to make it so you can provide your own function for essentially doing something when a new item is pushed to the array. But for now, let's leave it right there. But this dot 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 elements is using the rest parameter syntax here to simply accept an unlimited amount of items after the on push. So for example, we can now say null as the first argument here. Then everything else is going to be passed into elements and we can access it like a normal array. With that being said, we can now call the super function right here to call the parent constructor. We're going to be calling the constructor of the standard array, and we can pass in here the elements once again using dot dot dot, that we passed in. So with this change, there's going to be no functionality differences in terms of the array. So back in the browser, we can see once again, names is still the same array. So everything is normal. Nothing has changed in terms of functionality. Now, going back inside here, we can now say, look, this dot on push is going to be equal to here, the on push which we passed in. So now we're simply keeping a reference to the function which we're going to be passing in. In this case, it's going to be null, but we're going to change this null to be something else very shortly. Now, let's drop down here. We can now override the built-in push method. So make sure you use the same naming, so push right here. And then we're going to be once again taking through the rest parameters and passing through multiple elements just like this. That way we can replicate the same functionality as the standard push of the array. Okay, so we can just say super.push calling the original version of push. Okay, and we can say dot 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 elements right here. Once again, no functionality changes. back in the browser. If I say names.push and we, add Bob to that list, press enter, names now has Bob, so the push is working perfectly fine, the same as usual. Back inside here now, we can now say, look, let's simply console.log, let's just log out the number 30, okay? Save this back in the browser, we're gonna push on Bob, and we get 30 right there. So this is where we can now sort of start adding some new functionality. So when a new item gets pushed to the array, we're gonna say, look, okay, if there is a onPush function defined, okay, we can call it. We can say this.onPush, then we're going to pass in an instance. So we're going to pass in this instance. So the current array that is being, that items are being pushed onto. So that array, okay? Now we can actually pass in a function here. I'm going to pass in console.log as an example, okay? I'll save this, go back in the browser, call push Bob, press enter, and we get here this console.log. Of course, this refers to the array itself, so we get a list of our items here, including Bob. But now we can see we can pass in whatever we want here. We can say, for example, const onPush equal to a new function. This function can take in the array instance, of course, this. Then we can say, okay, let's do something like this. We're going to say, look, const mylist equal to document.getElementById, passing through here my list. We're now going to say mylist.innerHTML equal to an empty string. So we're simply going to be clearing the list whenever a new item is added to the names array. Okay, and then we can simply loop through every single name in the array and add it to that list HTML element. So we can say for name of array, okay? We can now just say here simply my list.insert adjacent HTML. We can insert a new HTML string before the end of the list, so a simple append, okay? Then we can say, using the JavaScript template strings, the backtick near the one on your keyboard, we can just say here new ally tag and simply pass in here the name, just like that. So now, of course, we get a new list item for every single name in the array. So now we can simply pass in here onPush to the constructor, save this, go back in the browser, and we can now just say something like, names.push Bob, and we get all the names right there. Let's add something like Mel, and we get that. So that's working beautifully. Unfortunately, on a refresh, as we can see, it's going to be empty by default. So to fix that, we can just go back in the constructor. We can say, okay, look, if this.onPush, then we can say this.onPush, then pass in this. So now, of course, it's going to be running when the constructor is called. So when it gets created back in the browser, now you can see it's going to run straight away. So of course, you can add more things. You can do something for when items get deleted from the array and things like that. That's a simple example of extending a built-in data type or the array. And one more quick tip before I go is you can actually simplify this if statement. So we can actually say this. We're going to say this.onPush, then put a question mark. We're going to say, look, we're just saying here, is there an onPush property defined? So is it not null? Is it not undefined? So is it actually provided, right? We can then just say, okay, if it is, then dot, and then pass in this. So now we've taken this if statement and converted it into a single line just like that. Now the browser support for this is relatively low currently, I believe. So make sure you check the compatibility table before using this particular syntax right here, but we can copy this for the next one and it's the exact same thing. So that is how to extend built-in data types with JavaScript. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, drop a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.